My stepdaughter said I was too controlling for asking her to stop drinking under my roof. So I stopped controlling anything. No more rules, no more rides, no more covered bills. The first time she needed a sober adult at 2 a.m. Her call went to her biological father. She never asked me for anything again. They called it controlling. Not cruel, not abusive, just controlling. That strange, slippery insult people reserve for the ones trying to hold the walls upright while everyone else hammers at the beams. You're too controlling, Sophie said. She didn't shout it, didn't slam a door. She said it casually, like she was diagnosing a minor defect, like telling a man he was too tall or too boring. Something factual, not cruel, but meant to wound just the same. She said it because I asked her not to drink in the house. Not to bring that poison behind the same walls where her little brother slept. Not to leave half-empty vodka bottles under the couch or red Solo cups reeking of sugar and grain alcohol in the bathroom sink. I thought it was a fair ask. Apparently it wasn't. I stood there in the doorway of her bedroom, the cheap LED lights flickering pink and blue behind her, the kind that made the posters on her wall glow like ghosts. She was sitting on her bed, legs crossed, phone in hand, eyes never quite meeting mine. You're not even my real dad, she added, just in case the knife hadn't gone deep enough. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but this time it landed different. Something broke, not loudly, not all at once, just a slow, splintering crack in the center of me, like ice finally giving way under the weight of too many silent winters. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself, because what was left to say? I just stepped back, and then I kept stepping back. I stopped controlling anything. No more reminders about her dentist appointments. No more checking the oil in her car. No more quiet Venmos for coffee runs or late-night emergencies that always sounded suspiciously like fast food cravings. I took myself out of the picture the way a man pulls his hand off a hot stove. Quietly, permanently. The next day, I canceled the gas card tied to her license. A week later, I removed my payment from her Spotify and Uber Eats. I shut down the streaming services she used more than I ever did. I even logged into the family phone plan and switched her to her mother's account. She didn't notice right away. Kids like her never do. They live in a world padded by invisible labor, held aloft by hands they never bother to look at. It's not their fault entirely. The world never taught them to notice, only to expect. The first time she did notice, it was about the Wi-Fi. "Tom," she called from upstairs. "The internet's down." I looked up from my grating. "I canceled it." A pause. "Wait, what?" "You're not my responsibility," I said, calm, not cruel, just honest. She didn't respond. I heard her stomp down the hallway, then her door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Emily asked what happened, and I told her the truth. I'm done funding disrespect. Emily didn't argue. Not that night. She just sat beside me on the couch, too quiet, staring at the muted TV. Caleb wandered in later, asking if the Wi-Fi was out for everyone or just upstairs. I told him the truth. He nodded slowly, didn't argue. That's how Caleb was: careful, observant. He knew better than to step into fire just to prove he could. But Sophie, she needed to burn. It was 3 weeks later. Early morning. Maybe 6:20. The kind of hour that feels stolen from someone else's sleep. A knock at my bedroom window. Soft, then louder, then frantic. I opened the blinds and there she was. Sophie, eyes wide, mascara smeared down both cheeks. Her hoodie twisted sideways like it had been yanked halfway off in a struggle. She was shivering, even though it wasn't cold. Her breath came out fast, shallow. She'd lost her phone charger. Or maybe it died. She was down to 2% and had used it on 3 calls. One to Emily, who didn't pick up because she was working a night shift. One to her real dad, who declined it after the second ring, and one to me. I'd watched the screen light up on my nightstand, and I let it ring. That silence, that refusal to answer, felt heavier than any scream I'd ever delivered in my life. She stood outside for a full minute. I could have let her in, but I didn't. I just watched. Eventually, She wandered to the neighbor's porch and knocked. It was a retired couple. Don and Lisa, polite, God-fearing people with a wooden cross nailed to their fence and a back the blue sticker peeling off their mailbox. They let her in, let her sit in their kitchen. She vomited in their sink. Lisa cleaned it up while Don made toast and coffee. She didn't come home until almost noon. Didn't look at me. Didn't say a word. Emily came in late, exhausted, purse slung over her shoulder, her nurse's badge still clipped to her sweater. She looked at Sophie slumped on the couch and then looked at me. She called you. I know. You didn't answer? She said I'm not her real dad. Emily didn't respond, just turned toward the hallway, cheeks flushed with something between shame and anger. But she didn't say I was wrong. That silence, hers, said more than words ever could. Later that week, Lisa stopped me by the mailbox, said she hoped Sophie was okay, told me gently that she'd seemed scared, confused, a little messed up, said she didn't judge. Teenagers will be teenagers, but asked if we needed help. I thanked her, told her no, and walked back inside. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I counted it all up like a man balancing a final ledger. 3 years of paying into their lives, not just with money, but time, effort, care. Backpacks and textbooks, braces and extracurriculars, doctor's visits and oil changes and soccer cleats that never stayed tied. Every single expense passed through my hands, not because I had to, but because I wanted to build something stable for them, something safer than the chaos their biological father left behind. And all it took to erase it was one sentence. You're not even my real dad. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I never had been. But I knew this much. I was the one they called when the real one didn't answer. And from now on, I wouldn't answer either. The rule wasn't complicated. No drinking in the house. Not for kids. Not for guests. Not even for Emily and me. It wasn't a control thing. It was survival. I'd seen what alcohol did to my father. What it did to a house when one person stopped caring where the bottom of the bottle was. The slurred apologies, the broken dishes, the smell of anger floating in the air like gas. And I wasn't going to build a family on a floor soaked in that same old spill. So I said it on day one. When Emily and I moved in together, one house, one family, I made it clear. No drinking in this house. She agreed. Sophie pretended to. The first few months felt normal. Peaceful, even. Sophie kept to herself, loud as ever but never reckless. Caleb adjusted quickly. He liked order, structure, a full fridge and working locks on the doors. I thought maybe we were becoming something real, so I leaned in, paid for things before I was asked, covered Caleb's dental when his insurance lapsed, bought Sophie new tires when hers went bald. I even added her car to my own policy, just so she wouldn't be riding around uninsured. I told myself this is what fathers do. They step up, they protect, they sacrifice. But then came the weekend Emily and I drove out of town, her mother's birthday in Santa Fe. Just 2 nights. I left emergency money on the counter, told Caleb to lock up, asked Sophie to stay out of trouble. She rolled her eyes. We got home late Sunday. I knew something was wrong before the car stopped. The driveway was littered with red plastic cups. Someone had urinated in the flower bed. A broken bottle sparkled on the steps like shattered stained glass. Inside, the living room stank of booze and cologne, fast food wrappers stuffed into couch cushions. The air reeked of rebellion, like teenagers trying too hard to prove they were grown. Sophie was asleep in her room, door wide open, music still playing. Emily looked around in disbelief. She turned to me, mouth opening like she might say something. Then she closed it. I didn't speak either. I just walked down the hallway and unplugged the router. The next morning, I confronted Sophie. She didn't deny it, didn't flinch, just crossed her arms and said, "You're too controlling. It's just a party." She said it like I'd murdered her freedom. Then she smiled that cruel practice smile, the one she inherited from someone else, not Emily, not me, and dropped the hammer. "You're not even my real dad." Same words, different tone. This time it wasn't a protest. It was a declaration of independence. I stood there and said nothing, because she wasn't wrong. And maybe that was the most painful part. I wasn't her real dad, just the man who'd kept her lights on. So I made a decision. I stopped keeping the lights on. That evening, I pulled out my laptop and a folder I hadn't opened in months. Family expenses, dozens of accounts, subscriptions, insurance policies, autopays. My name was everywhere. Sophie's car? Transferred back to my name. I'd been paying the note anyway. Her gas card? Cancelled. Phone plan? Split. I moved her line to Emily's profile. Let her mother decide what came next. The music services, streaming apps, grocery deliveries, tutor payments, all erased. Like cutting cords off a dead tree. She didn't notice at first. The first sign came 2 days later when she tried to fill her tank and the pump declined. She came home furious, slamming cabinets, demanding answers. I was sitting at the kitchen table grading lab reports. You canceled my card? I nodded. Yes. She waited. Like maybe I'd add an apology, a justification, some adult guilt to soften the blow. I didn't. You can't just take things away without warning. You told me I'm not your dad, I said. So I stopped playing the role. Emily walked in midway through. She heard just enough to start crying. Not a loud, dramatic cry. Just that broken, exhausted weeping of someone who can't find the middle between two people drifting in opposite directions. I didn't comfort her, because I couldn't be husband, father, and emotional glue all at once. That's the part nobody talks about. When you love people who don't love each other, you're forced to become the bridge. And bridges break when the weight gets too heavy. Later, I found Caleb in the hallway, fidgeting with a loose string on his hoodie. Is it true? He asked. Did you cancel everything? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then, almost in a whisper, will you cancel mine too? His voice wasn't defiant. It was scared. No, I said. Not if you keep being who you've been. He gave me a look I'll never forget. Not grateful, not relieved, but understanding. Like a kid realizing that the rules had changed and now everything had weight. 3 days passed. Then a week. Then the night came, cold, quiet, like the air had thickened with something unsaid. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it. My phone buzzed. Sophie's name. 2:01 a.m. I stared at it until it stopped. Then the knock came, not on the front door, but the bedroom window. She looked like a ghost. Mascara stained, hoodie zipped up to her chin, trembling in the pale light of the porch. I opened the window. Didn't say a word. My friend left me downtown, she whispered. I didn't know who else to call. Where's your dad? She swallowed. Didn't answer. Your mom. She's working. I waited. She didn't ask again. Just stood there, bottom lip trembling. I could smell the vodka on her breath even from inside the room. I closed the window. 20 minutes later, Lisa, the neighbor, pulled into the driveway. Walked her up the steps, hand on her shoulder like guiding a child through traffic. Didn't say a word to me, just gave me a look, something between pity and understanding. Sophie never made eye contact again. The next morning, Emily said I'd given up on them. I laughed, quiet, bitter. I told her the truth. I was the only one holding it all together. All I asked for was respect. All I got was contempt. You call it giving up. I call it letting go. She cried, said she didn't recognize me anymore. But I think she finally did. Because the man she'd married was never their father. He was a volunteer. And volunteers get to quit. That was the night I stopped being afraid of the word step. Stepfather. Stepped on. Stepped over. Now I was stepping out. And for the first time in years, my back didn't hurt. My chest didn't feel like it was shrinking. My name wasn't tied to debt I didn't create. My phone was silent. Nobody asked me for anything. Not even an apology. It was a month later when the house finally went still. Not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that means something's broken under the floorboards. Something no one wants to admit they hear. Even Emily started sleeping in shifts, pretending she was just tired from work. Caleb lingered in his room, volume down, eyes low. Sophie moved like a tenant, silent, bitter, careful not to speak unless provoked. It was exactly what she said she wanted. Less control, less authority, less me. And I gave it to her. I gave her silence. I gave her distance. I gave her absence so complete it started to echo. Until the night the call came again. 2:14 a.m. My phone lit up on the nightstand, the same screen, the same name. Sophie. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, a knock. Not at the window this time, the front door. She didn't have her keys. I got up and stood in the hallway. Didn't open it. Just listened. The knock turned frantic. Then softer. Then a voice. Please. She was crying. But not for me. I heard her again. Please pick up. Dad, please. The call went to voicemail. I opened the door. Just enough to see her. Not enough to invite her in. She was leaning against the frame, hair matted, hoodie stained. I could smell the bar on her. Cheap vodka, desperation, smoke she hadn't smoked herself but had absorbed through proximity. Her hands were shaking. She didn't even look up at me. I didn't know where to go, she said. I didn't. He wouldn't answer. I called him twice. You could have called an Uber. I couldn't afford it. She looked up then, finally, and I saw it. That flicker. Not shame. Not guilt. Just the dawning realization that the safety net she'd set on fire wasn't going to rebuild itself. I need a shower, she whispered. Please. I stepped aside. Let her in. She walked past me like a ghost. No thanks. No apology. Just the shuffle of someone who thought the door would always open, no matter how many times they kicked it on their way out. I sat at the kitchen table. Listened to the pipes creak. The water run. The cabinet open, the one I always stocked with clean towels. She still expected it all to be there. Like magic. 15 minutes later, she emerged. Hair wet, face clean, hoodie gone. Wearing one of Emily's old t-shirts. She stood by the fridge like a guest. Waiting for permission. There's no Wi-Fi, she said. I know. A beat passed. Can I stay here tonight? You're already inside. She slept on the couch. Emily came home an hour later, saw her curled up under the blanket, gave me a look. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. The next morning, Sophie was gone before sunrise. No note, no message. Just an empty mug by the sink and a faint scent of hotel shampoo in the bathroom. She didn't call again, and I didn't reach out, because something had shifted. She had seen the edge, touched it, learned how cold it was when no one picked up the phone. She had knocked. Not on her father's door, not on her mother's, but on mine. And even though I didn't answer like a father would, I answered like a man who still remembered how to be decent. That was enough. But I felt no pride in it. No triumph. Just a kind of quiet confirmation that the road I was on had no off-ramp. I wasn't parenting anymore. I was observing. Like one of those science experiments I assigned in class, remove the variable, observe the collapse. Days turned to weeks. Sophie grew quieter, more careful. She still came home, but not late. No new parties. No slamming doors. But also no apology. She ate dinner in silence. Kept her distance. Carried herself like someone who understood the rules now, even if she didn't like them. Caleb watched everything. He never asked questions, but I could feel him taking notes. He became more polite. More deliberate. He stopped asking for things casually. Started saying thank you like it meant something. One night, he asked me if he could earn money for a new backpack instead of just asking for one. Said he didn't want to assume anymore. That hit harder than anything Sophie ever said. Because Caleb was learning what Sophie never had. That respect isn't something you barter for after the damage is done. It's something you offer early, consistently, quietly, before the fire spreads. Emily noticed too, but her way of noticing was silence. She stopped asking me to fix things for Sophie. Stopped leaving bills with my name on them. Stopped pretending we were a unified team. She began dividing the household without saying the words. Her daughter, my space, their mess. And so I withdrew further. Stopped cooking dinner for everyone. Stopped setting plates for 4. Stopped checking if Sophie made it home. I went from a father to a tenant, from a husband to a bystander. It was Emily who cracked first. "You've changed," she said one night. I didn't look up from my book. I adjusted. "She's still a kid, Tom." "No," I said. "She made an adult decision. She drew a line. And I believed her. She's just angry." So was I. The difference is I paid for what made her angry. Emily sat down. Her voice dropped. She called Scott again. "Good." He didn't answer. "I know." She said she hates him. I nodded. Emily's voice broke. But she still called him. Because fantasy is easier than ownership. Because he never had to say no. He never had to show her the line. He got to disappear, so he stayed perfect. "And you?" I stayed. That ended the conversation. A week later, Sophie turned 18. No party. No cake. Just a quiet day with Caleb and Emily. She didn't ask for anything. Didn't invite friends. Didn't even stay home. I found her in the driveway that night, sitting on the hood of her car, staring at the stars like they might spell out a future that made more sense. She didn't see me watching from the window. Didn't know I saw her wipe her face. Didn't know I saw her open her phone, hover over a contact, then close it. She'd stopped calling him too. Because somewhere along the way, she realized he wasn't going to catch her either. But it was too late for me to step back in. Because love without boundaries isn't love. The servitude. And I had served long enough. She graduated without telling me. No invitation. No program in the mail. No whispered acknowledgement that I might want to be there. Not even a group photo on the fridge. Just silence. Like she was sweeping me from the narrative entirely. I found out from Caleb. He came home that night with a rolled-up diploma in his hand and a cheap plastic lei around his neck. I asked him how the ceremony was. He said it was fine. Said there were speeches. Said the wind almost knocked over the sound system. He didn't mention Sophie. Didn't have to. Emily came in later, radiant, proud. Her eyes glistening the way only a mother's can when a milestone passes. She kissed me on the cheek. Asked if I wanted to see photos. I said no. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Tom, come on. Don't do this." She did it. She's just a kid. She's 18. She's old enough to reject me with purpose. Emily didn't respond. Just stood there holding the phone, the light from the screen making her look older than she was. We stared at each other across the kitchen. Two people who'd started out trying to build something sacred and ended up wading through wreckage. She didn't push again. Just walked down the hall. Closed the door softly behind her. I didn't ask to see the pictures. Didn't ask how Sophie looked in her gown. I imagined it anyway. That proud tilt of the chin. That subtle smirk. Surrounded by friends who never knew I existed. She wanted a clean break. And she made one. That summer I moved out. No screaming match. No late-night packing. Just a slow process of subtraction. I started sleeping on the couch. Started keeping my work bag by the door. Paid the bills I was responsible for and none I wasn't. Caleb asked once if I was leaving. I said yes. He didn't cry. Just nodded. Emily didn't ask me to stay. I rented a one-bedroom near the school where I taught. Small. Clean. Mine. The walls were bare. The fridge held only what I needed. The silence felt surgical at first, too precise, too empty. But over time, it became a kind of music. The sound of nobody needing me falsely. I still saw Caleb sometimes. He'd visit on weekends, help me with yard work, ask for advice on college applications. He was careful with the way he said thanks, like he didn't want it to sound hollow. Sophie never called, never texted, never sent a message through her brother. Her absence became a certainty, like gravity. I stopped wondering if it would change. Emily reached out less and less. First, it was to check on me. Then it was to ask about Caleb. Then nothing. I watched the seasons turn through the same windows I once stared through waiting for her to come home from shifts. Fall passed. Then winter. One night I found an old photo in a drawer. The four of us smiling at some fair I barely remembered. I stared at it until the light went out. I didn't cry. Just put it back face down and closed the drawer. I learned something no one warns you about. When you pull away from a broken family, they don't chase you. They just shift the weight. Pretend you were never holding it to begin with. The house moved on without me. The bills got paid somehow. The groceries appeared. The holidays came and went without my name on a single tag. I was erased cleanly, efficiently, like they'd been practicing. And maybe they had. But there was peace in it. A kind of brutal, unglamorous peace. No more lectures about curfews. No more begging someone to care about boundaries. No more watching the child of another man look me in the eyes and spit the truth I tried not to believe. You're not my real dad. They were right. I wasn't. I was a man who mistook presence for welcome. A man who confused sacrifice with belonging. I paid for groceries and birthdays and late-night pickups, thinking I was buying my way into the narrative. But I was just the credits at the end, necessary but forgettable. The truth is, you can carry someone else's child across a desert, give them water, shield them from the sun, build shelter from your own bones, and they'll still run toward the ghost of the man who left them. Because that ghost doesn't say no, doesn't enforce curfews, doesn't cut off phone plans or pull financial support when respect is gone. That ghost is perfect because he's not real. And me? I was the man who stayed, the one who said no, the one who eventually walked away. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring wasn't enough. There's no medal for enduring contempt. No parade for men who pour their paychecks into thankless mouths. No badge for being almost a father. You either are or you aren't. And I wasn't. Sophie's voice still echoes sometimes. Not in the air, in my memory. Sharp, clipped, a line rehearsed for years before she ever said it out loud. You're not even my real dad. She meant it. And I believed her. So now I ask you, whoever's listening, whoever's still convinced that kindness earns loyalty, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying the bill just to be allowed in the room? Would you have smiled through the disrespect, hoping one day they'd say thank you? Would you have broken your back just to be called nothing? Because I did. For years. And in the end, it was silence, not rage, that taught me the truth. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is leave the door closed. Let them knock. Let them call someone else. Let them feel the weight of your absence. And finally understand it used to be your presence holding everything up. I am not their father, but I was their foundation. And when I left, the cracks spread fast. So tell me, was I wrong to walk away? Or was I just the first one honest enough to admit I was never really standing on solid ground?